Hello and welcome to the Self-Storage Made Simple podcast. I am super excited tonight. I've been waiting literally for like half a year to get this guy to come and join me on the show. I can't even begin to tell you how many follow-up texts, phone calls, emails I've had to do to bug him to come and join us. I'm really excited. He's somebody that I vibe with really well, somebody who I admire their intelligence and their knowledge in the self-storage space. So I want to welcome someone I'm proud to call a friend, David Perleschi, one of the principals of Franklin Street Self-Storage Brokerage Group. Dave, thanks so much for coming and joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Thaddeus. I appreciate you bringing me on here, and looking forward to this podcast. This is great.
Yeah, listen, we talk quite a bit, whether it's on the phone, in person, when we're at various events together, and always enjoy just the free flow of the conversation. And that's what we're going to do for the next half hour. I always start the podcast the same way, though. So I'm going to ask you this question because storage is such a niche. I always love to hear the story of how people found themselves getting into this wonderful place that we live in.
No. So it's an interesting story. So just backtracking here a bit, I started my real estate career here actually in Tampa in 2012. I was with a startup multifamily firm. We were fully integrated on the property management, acquisitions, project management. I actually started out as a construction guy. So I was a project manager for them, was renovating 100 to 400 unit multifamily complexes in the state of Florida. Did that for about 4.5, 5 years with that firm at Avesta. Was quickly started doing some acquisitions of my own and syndicating some small multifamily deals in the Cocoa Beach area. And a family friend of mine was buying self-storage facilities in the Carolinas. And at that time, that's where Frank was, and he was doing acquisitions over there. And I ended up moving from Tampa over to Charlotte. And we had a handful of projects that were 20 to 30,000 square feet that needed expansion. And they needed somebody that had the construction experience as well as the acquisitions and like seller interface experience. So decided to join that firm on the self-storage side, and I loved it. I mean, I remember the first week or two being in the storage business, and I was like, wait, we can renovate these projects without having to notice every single tenant, without having to coordinate with the property manager, the regional manager, the on-site leasing consultants, dealing with, the various issues that come up on multifamily rehab projects. And it was great. I mean, I instantly fell in love with the asset class because it just felt really easy in terms of like the overall takeover, implementation of the value add, all the aesthetic work you can do in the exterior of the properties to quickly beautify them and just make them aesthetically pleasing. So that's kind of my foray into the self-storage business, which was awesome. Yeah.
So many questions that come out of that. And I'm going to go to one that popped into my head, which is you said something interesting. We always hear about, no toilets, no tenants, I can't remember what the third one is, but there's 3 things for storage. I always think of it in terms of like when you're doing construction on storage, that you don't have to go put in drywall and carpets and toilets and all that stuff. For you, it was something different, though. It was not having to deal with having to go into an apartment and deal with a tenant and coordinate schedules. I find that very fascinating, so much easier than what you're dealing with in multifamily.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when you're doing a full roofing project on a multifamily property, you're looking at disturbing 100 to up to 400 to 500 living tenants that are paying, and those are their homes. So as you can imagine, in Florida specifically, in the summertime, you get these rainstorms that come out of nowhere. So I remember being out there on site with the pouring rain and just praying that the roofing staff would be able to go ahead and get the tarp up because the roof would be completely exposed. So we've had some interesting stories that have happened there where, ceiling drywall have collapsed inside of units due to freak rains out of nowhere. And on the storage side, that was never an issue, right? I mean, you're doing exterior renovations, you're doing your expansions, you're not running into many issues when it comes to like the tenant side. And it was really easy to kind of do these projects. I was used to doing anywhere between 4 to 6 full multifamily renovations, exterior to interior a year, and then doing it on the storage side was like I said, was very easy. It was a welcome challenge.
Nice transition. I want to dig into you Frank DeSalvo, who's your partner at Franklin Street. You said you went up to North Carolina. That was Frank. That was the friend that pulled you into that.
So Frank, yeah, Frank was a part of that firm. The principal of that firm, Dan, was a family friend of mine as well. And quickly working with that company, I became really good friends with Frank DeSalvo. And I was taking a lot of the initial guidance in the business and advice from him. Early on, it was trying to source off-market deals directly from sellers. So Frank would have the relationship with a client. At the time, he was based out of New York City. And I would run out to a market, go meet with a client that he would organize the meeting with, and then I would pop into all the local facilities in that given market. And this is back in 2016, 2017.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, 50% of the owners would be at the facility operating them. So I would just come in and say, hey, my name is David. I'm with a group that buys self-storage properties. We'll love to talk to you more about your deal. And almost every single time, they would give me a cup of coffee and would sit down and chat for an hour or two. Yeah. Times have definitely changed where now you've gone to a remote management, you've gone to third-party management. A lot of these facilities have now become institutionalized, bigger expansions have happened to them. So it's not as frequent where you see that, but it was really good learning experience. And Frank really kind of gave me a lot of guidance early on. I owe a lot of my experience and what I've learned in this business to him early on that acquisition side.
So take me on the journey now, because you guys are working for the group in North Carolina doing acquisitions and kind of everything for storage facilities. How do you go from that to where you and Frank are now as the heads of the brokerage side of self-storage for Franklin Street?
Yeah. So we were a small family office or private equity shop based out of New York City. I was based out of Charlotte. We were acquiring off-market facilities directly from sellers. And then at one point in 2020, we were trying to sell or trying to figure out a way to get these deals done and monetize a lot of these relationships with the owners in the Carolinas that we had good standing relationships with. And at that time, our firm just wasn't looking to acquire as many facilities. Obviously, COVID happened in early 2020. They went on pause on the acquisition side. So I ended up taking some time off and just moved back to New York. Frank decided to transition into brokerage. I helped out a bit from New York, just kind of shopping some comps, reaching out to some other contacts that Frank could kind of meet with that I may have the relationship with at that time. And for months, Frank was just calling me and just saying like, hey man, enough time off. You got to come join me over here on the storage side. You're going to love this business. And at that time, I was like, no, I don't know, man. I don't want to really be into brokerage. I don't like it. I don't think it would be a good fit. And finally, I would say almost reluctantly, decided to like team up with Frank and Thaddeus. I kid you not, in the first 2 weeks, I immediately fell in love with the business on the brokerage side. I mean, I remember like it was yesterday. I think it was right after 4th of July weekend, and it was my first day cold calling. And Frank told me to call in the Asheville, North Carolina territory. I think I made 50 calls that day, and I had this list of owners that were interested in doing a valuation, and what we call in brokerage a broker opinion of value, so BOV. So I called Frank at the end of the day, recapping the day. I was like, hey, when an owner's requesting a valuation, how should I structure the email? And he was like, why? You have people who are interested in doing BOVs? And I was like, yeah, I have 4. And he was like, no way. I was like, yeah, I got 4 BOVs. And he goes, well, first of all, that's unbelievable. And he's like, second of all, don't get used to this because that's not an everyday thing. And then he was like, you're a natural. He's like, you're going to be awesome at this. So
That's
it
awesome.
was, it was great. But yeah, so we ended up joining the Sands investment group over there, started running up the self-storage sales division, and it quickly became really, really busy. And we went from doing a few BOVs a week to quickly doing 6 to 8 a week. And then we were doing 6 to 8 listings a month. And this is the back half of 2021. And the business really took off. And we knew we had something really special at that point. And we needed to get into a position where we quickly evolved into national self-storage brokers. And that even happened by accident as well, where we started having clients reach out to us in, as you can imagine, most self-storage owners are multi-state owners. So we were really doing the Carolinas, and it evolved into doing a deal in Michigan and a few other deals in the Midwest. And then we quickly realized like we could take this national. So it's been an incredible experience, and I owe a lot of my brokerage side and skills and expertise and really like the whole experience and getting involved in this. It's all due to Frank. Props to him. He was the one that kind of pushed me into it, and I'm very grateful for him pushing me to do this job.
That's awesome, man. I have so much fun with you guys and your energy and the way that you interact with each other. Obviously, Frank and I had the relationship purely because we both went to the same university. We're both graduates of Tufts. And so I initially connected with him and then got connected with you and love that. And it makes sense to me, and seeing the way you guys have operated, that relationship is so close because you've really built this business as partners. And so my next question is going to be, that can be a good or a bad, right? So I want to know how that relationship with Frank, obviously you're giving him credit as kind of mentoring in a certain sense, but how do you guys play off each other, and how does that partnership work where you are filling in gaps for each other?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great having somebody that's a partner and that you can rely on for, when you're out or you're at meetings or you're you're on a vacation or you're taking some time off. We agree in a lot of things, and like strong and good partnerships, we disagree in a lot of things. But I think there's a healthy amount of debating and figuring out where things are going. One thing we're always aligned on, and this is very important in any partnership and whatever you're doing, is the growth and getting to the next level. And that's one thing I would say with Frank. He's always somebody that's pushing to be the best. He's always pushing to work harder. He's always pushing himself, the rest of the team to be the best in the business. And that's one thing I pride myself on. And I pride myself on not only in a business perspective, but on a personal way to always be the best and thriving. So that's one thing we see eye to eye on, is always outperforming ourselves, outperforming the market, not being negative, changing the perspective no matter what. And there's times, where we need help, where I'm like, hey man, I'm having a tough time with this deal or this client. I need some advice on how I should handle things. And he's always giving me invaluable advice that's always spot on. So being a part of a partnership in a team where everybody has your best interests at heart is critical in growing and being as good as you can.
You keep giving me like 7 questions that I want to ask off of one answer that you give. But here's the one I'm going to ask, because I know a little bit about your background. And I was thinking about it when you talked about the 4 BOVs on your first day of cold calling. You approach this from your athletic background, and it
Right.
seems pretty apparent, right? And tell me the role that athletics played in your life and how it translates into your career now.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I started playing baseball when I was 12 years old, and it's a really late age to start playing
Yeah.
sports. I quickly, my first day playing, I think I had my first game, I had a few home runs, and my parents, immigrated to the United States from Kosovo, so from Eastern Europe. So From Eastern Europe and Kosovo, baseball is not a thing. It's only an American sport.
Yeah.
So, they quickly realized like, wow, he's pretty talented. But it wasn't always that way. As you kind of evolve in different levels and you get older, you go to bigger fields, you play greater and better competition. And I always found myself not being the best one on the field. So I'd quickly work to try and be the best player. And almost every time at the end of the season, I'd be, in the middle of the order. I'd be playing shortstop. And I found myself to be one of the, better players in the team, and always pushed myself to be at that level. In baseball, I think it's such an extraordinary sport where it teaches you need to always stay positive and have a short-term memory. We're trained to fail and expect to fail almost all the time. But really, you're supposed to go in with the approach that you're going to win and you're going to succeed and you're going to perform. So I think brokerage and in business and in life, a lot of things are going wrong, right? A lot of things aren't going right for you. And specifically in brokerage, where you might make 50 calls in a day and you have 49 owners hanging up on you, but all you need is that one conversation. All you need is that one BOV, just like in baseball, right? You may have a game, you're playing shortstop, and this has happened to me in the past, where you make a few errors. You strike out 3 times, and almost every single time the way baseball is that the game will be on the line, the ball will be hit to you, and you need to make a play. Or, bases will be loaded, down 1 run, you've had an awful game, and then all of a sudden you're up at bat, So, and in baseball, people have a short-term memory, right? You go up to bat, you win the game for the team. Nobody remembers David Proleschi had an awful game and had 3 errors. All they remember is like David won the game. Yeah. And same thing in brokerage, right? You may have 49 bad calls, or you may have a week or 2 weeks of just not doing a good job on the phones. And all you need is that one client to reach out that's receptive, that wants to do a VOV and is looking to take the next step and get the deal listed. So I like to translate a lot of like my past baseball experiences in sports and being resilient and persistent to like what I'm doing now.
I love that. That made me smile on so many levels. I'm not going to talk about my own career as an athlete, but I will say that I can absolutely relate on how important that is. And it goes to where the next question I want to ask, which is, you talked about going into Sands, Frank pulling you back in late 2020 into 2021, where we were seeing like, man, the transactions that were happening in storage, it was like you couldn't even imagine the prices that people were paying for properties. How important was that mindset that you have from the athletic background as we went into the beginning of 2023 and the second half of 2023, even now into 2024, where the market shifted considerably, nowhere near the transaction volume? How important was that mindset for you dealing with that transition?
Yeah, I mean, the mindset's critical, Thaddeus. We talk about this daily on our team, and it's about shifting perspective and focus. A lot of owners have the perspective right now where, hey, my facility's not worth as much as it was worth 2 or 3 years ago. But you have to shift that perspective and say, well, it's worth more than you bought it at 5 years ago. So it's worth more than you bought it 10 years ago. So it's about shifting that focus and that perspective for a lot of clients. We had a down market, and we're still, arguably in a down market right now. And transaction volume last year was considerably down. We were down, I would say 70% year over year in terms of sales volume and how we performed. And we sold half the deals the last year than we did the year before that, 2022. So I think it's remaining positive. And understanding what you control, what you can control. For us, we understand what it takes to be a broker. We understand what it takes to have your client's best interest at heart. We have a fiduciary duty to our clients, and we need to sell their deals at top of the market value. But at the same time, we know if sellers are motivated to sell deals, and if there's a certain market acceptance of where things are, we have to communicate the reality of where things are in the market. Some clients appreciate it and they like it. Some clients are upset about it. But at the end of the day, all we can control is the process and getting deals to market, working them as hard as we can, and delivering an offer that a client really, whether he wants to accept it or not, is out of our control either. So we have to control the process. What I harp on all the time, and I tell my team all the time, is all we can control is the front end of the business. And the front end is, one, the effort, two, the attitude, and then three is BOVs, right? 50% of the job is showing up, 40% of the job is being enthusiastic, and the rest of the 10% is just a dogfight. So, that's what we communicate all the time to our team. We keep each other focused on that. And at the end of the day, all we can focus on is the front end BOVs we're generating on the front end. And we're doing about 20 BOVs a month. And based on the amount of BOVs we do a month, we have a ratio that we hit. And we're able to get anywhere between 3 to 5 listings per month. And that's all we can control. Whether a deal gets listed, whether a deal gets sold, whether a deal goes on market, whether it falls out, all these are out of our control. What's in our control is on the front end, which is generating BOVs, reaching out to clients, updating BOVs, and that's all we can do as brokers.
I love the mindset, man. I could talk to you for hours about this. I'm gonna change the direction a little bit here, and because of a couple things you talked about, which is that idea of being better, right? Continuing to fight that fight with yourself. Not only, and I definitely could talk about this because there's been a proliferation of brokers in the self-storage space as the space has started to grow and people, big equity started to see it and it started to gain more recognition. You're fighting in a bigger pool of guys trying to get a slice of the pie. Obviously, you and Frank are not daunted by that in any way, shape, or form. And you understand that personal fight. You talked about that. The reason I'm going down this road is when I first met you in person, it was actually at a mastermind. We were down in Sarasota at the Scott Myers Mastermind. We just spent a week sitting next to each other down in San Diego, which is, there's worse places in the world to be hanging out for a week. I'm interested to know why you and Frank have made that investment in going to listen. It's arguable that you two know as much or more about storage as anybody in that room. What is it about going to masterminds that appeals to you guys, and why have you made that such a core part of your business?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Thaddeus. So
you can keep saying that all day. You just make me feel good.
No, that is a good question. I mean, for us, our passion is obviously the storage business. But I think like anybody else that's in the investment business or investment sales, our passion is to be owners. And what better group of people to be with than the mastermind folks that own and operate facilities? Frank and I own some facilities as well. We bought a deal 2 years ago in Pensacola. It was a small climate control facility. We're dealing with occupancy decrease right now. We're dealing with rates dropping significantly due to some, REIT operators in that market and competition. So, we feel a lot of like the struggles and the pain that owners feel in the business. So for us, we want to be a part of those circles because we want to be in a position where we own and manage several facilities down the road as well. So it really helps us kind of keep our heads on straight, understand, hey, the end goal is to be owner operators. However, our day jobs are being investment sales brokers and self-storage brokers. But, every single day we're learning more and more about facilities, learning about different markets, learning about different struggles owners are going through. We're talking to third-party, contractors, lenders, owners, operators, buyers every single day. So our experience in terms of who we're in touch with in the industry is pretty extensive, and we love being a part of groups like the Storage Mastermind with Scott Myers, because we feel as though we can communicate a lot of what we're hearing in the business to people who are genuinely curious about what's happening.
I love that. The next question I want to ask you is kind of about where we're at in this market, right? We had that stretch 2020 through 2022. Late into 2022, even well after the Fed started raising interest rates, we were still seeing transactions the volume stayed pretty heavy through the end of 2022 at some ridiculous cap rates. I mean, people buying. I got a buddy I was talking to today actually sold a facility in 2022 at a like a 2.9 cap on
Yeah,
pro
yeah.
forma, like just stupid numbers that people were paying. And then we saw 2023, 20. You talked about the lowering in the volume of transactions you guys had, and it made perfect sense, right? Because interest rates are higher, but sellers don't really want to sell right after the drop of the market. So I guess my question for you is, are we seeing that point now where it's been long enough since the peak in 2022, early 2023 maybe, where sellers are finally starting to come to grips with the fact that, hey, I missed that Mount Everest moment. You know, is it time to sell anyway?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking to owners all the time, and there's different motivations for why people are selling. I think that's one thing you have to understand when bringing a deal to market. I mean, more often than not, a buyer's asking, "What's the story? You know, why is this owner deciding to sell?" So that's the number one thing you have to figure out as being an investment sales broker in self storage is what's the motivation here? Is debt coming due? Are they looking to retire? Are they looking to consolidate their portfolio? A lot of what we're seeing right now in the market is just maybe some deals that aren't working out where maybe they bought them 2 or 3 years ago and they try to enter a market they're not familiar with or try to grow a presence in the market that they don't have any local stores. So they're starting to cut bait and let some of those deals loose. Some other opportunities are just like perspective, like I was mentioning earlier, where, hey, I know the market is not where it was 2 years ago, but it's better than it was 10 years ago. I mean, you know, a lot of our clients, I would say 50% of our clients are mom and pop owner operators. So we're doing a valuation of a deal, and we'll probably, you know, we'll do an updated valuation if we've been in touch for 3 or 4 years. And sometimes they'll be a little bit upset because the valuation is about 20 or 30% less than where it was.
Yeah.
But oftentimes, you know, they understand where they're at and they're just like, hey, you know, whether it's, you know, 2.5 million or 2 million, you know, I bought this deal for $250,000, you know, 15 years ago, and I've expanded onto it. So it really makes no difference, no skin off their back. So I think as far as what's happening now with transaction and deal volume picking up, I think it's a lot of like market acceptance. You know, the sellers are understanding, you know, where the market is at now. The buyers have made it known where the market's at, and lenders have now started to kind of open things up a little bit. So I think that's the primary takeaway here is that, you know, everybody's accepting where things are at now.
I have like six questions. You may have seen me glancing over to the side because I had a bunch of questions I wanted to ask you. Quite frankly, we're going to have to do this again soon because I didn't even get to almost every question I wrote down ahead of time that I wanted to ask you. And there's a couple of big ones. I am going to finish by saying this, and as a form of a question. It seems like I follow you on social media. You're present on LinkedIn. It seems like, and Frank also, you guys have had a little more volume as far as listings and especially contracts and closings lately. Maybe I'm wrong, but from afar, it seems like that started to pick up a little bit.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you know, last year was a tough year, and it was a tough year for everybody. But you know, we transitioned over to Franklin Street and Q4 of 2022. And I think when you transition to a new brokerage and a new company, there's about 6 to 9 months, if not a year, of laying down the foundation and the runway as far as where you're going to be. I mean, we were at Sands, and when we transitioned over, it was just me, Frank, and our senior analyst, Zach Levine. We've now grown to a team of 10 people. So I think over the course of the last few years and then making the transition over, it's laying that foundation and understanding what people's roles and responsibilities are. At Sands, we were the end all be all for everything on the deals, from when sourcing to putting under contract to marketing, inbound leads to you know, deal maintenance and transaction coordinator work, and down to, you know, calling title and calling, you know, everybody escrow to make sure the money's been deposited.
Yeah.
I think as you grow as a team, you have to understand what people's roles and responsibilities are. And now we have a, you know, a transaction coordinator, we have 2 analysts, we have a client services manager and marketing coordinator, we have a team of 5 brokers. So it's leveraging everybody in the team to make sure they're doing what's the highest and best use of everybody's time. And that's definitely translated into this year, Thaddeus. I mean, the foundation's set. The team is ready for growth. We're very fortunate and lucky and grateful to be at a company like Franklin Street that's investing in our team, in the resources, in the salaries that are required to be in these positions and grow for a lot of the support staff. So we've definitely grown, and based on where our numbers are at right now, this is gonna be the biggest year we've ever had. We're gonna outperform 2022, and it's not by accident, right? It's from the hard work and everything we've done to set the foundation to grow and eventually be, the best and biggest team in the business.
I love that. Right. And I always try and honor my guests with a 30-minute cutoff, and the listeners too will want it to be something they can listen to in a car ride. We're already over 30 minutes, so I'm going to start wrapping up now. But as I said,
do a part two.
I really hope we can do that soon, because I have so many different areas. I really wanted to talk to you specifically about your LinkedIn presence. We'll get to that in part 2 for sure. I hope you guys watching can understand why I have such respect for Frank DeSalvo and David Perleschi. Obviously, his knowledge just reeks, but even more than the knowledge is the attitude they have towards other people, and then the work ethic, which is something that you can't replace. So I want to give people a chance, if they are watching, they want to reach out to you and get in touch with you guys. What's the best way to get a hold of David Perleschi?
Yeah, feel free to call me. My cell phone's 914-365-0752. You can also on LinkedIn, David Perleschi. That's 2 L's for the last name. I'm on Twitter, same first and last name on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is. Feel free to reach out to me.
I love that so much. Again, thank you so much for taking the time. Look forward to having these conversations, whether they're on the podcast again or not. Always value the insight I get from having the conversations with you, David. Thanks for spending a little time with us tonight. That is it for this episode of the Self-Storage Made Simple podcast. Thank you guys all for watching. If you did get something of value, reach out to David, let him know that, but also hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel so you get updates the next time that somebody comes on, and we will see you guys next week for the Self-Storage Made Simple podcast.
My pleasure, Thaddeus. Thank you very much for having me on.
Absolutely a pleasure and a gift to the people listening, David. So thanks for all the insight.